Welcome back to Sports Take. Mark Farzetta, Tone DeShields, Eric Gunn in for the great Rob Ellis, who's off this week. Thanks for joining us today. We got a lot to get to in this segment when it comes to our camp crushes, if you will, as well as a guy named DeVonta Smith, who Darius Slay referred to as, quote, won't be long before we're calling him the best receiver in the NFL. DeVonta Smith, of course, 1,196 yards last season, 7 touchdowns, had 100 yards in the Super Bowl, had a touchdown reception in the playoffs last year. He is playing opposite A.J. Brown, and he's being thrown the football by, I believe, a guy that's going to be a perennial MVP candidate in the NFL. Gunnar, I'll ask you this question. How far is he off that mark, or is that just a piping hot take from a teammate in Darius Slay looking to hype up his boy, DeVonta Smith? What do you think?
Well, I give Darius Slay a lot of props for giving his boy a shout out like that. And you can see from year 1 to year 2 that DeVonta Smith made incredible strides in terms of route running, toughness, tough mental mettle. Some of the shots he took last year on the playing field for a guy who is that slight of build, you sitting there going, oh, man, that's it. He's done. And he pops up like one of those Weeble wobbles. You can knock him down, but you can't keep him down. I agree. I don't think he's that far off from being mentioned as one of the best. To say the best in the league, I don't know, because you're always going to have, as long as they're in the league, you're going to have guys like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, who are always going to be in that conversation because they have consistently put up high volume numbers and because of their athletic prowess on the field. It's hard to sit here and say who's the best of the best. And you can't just base it on numbers. You have to look at a lot of different things. When I look at a receiver, not only how well he runs his routes, how few passes he drops, but can he block? Receivers are required to block more than ever before in today's game, especially because it's a passing league. And a lot of teams now like to throw the hitch pass, like to run the jet sweeps. So you guys on the edges have to get up, stick their nose in somebody's jersey and block as well. I do think within the next couple of years, DeVonta Smith, if he continues to ascend on the level he is ascending on, he will be consistently mentioned among the best in the game. But to single him out as the best in the game, that's one teammate's accolades to another. That's not disrespect. That's just the fact of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Justin Jefferson Tone is the best, and I think he is the best in the game right now. I think guys like Stephon Diggs, I think guys like Devontae Adams, I think those guys are going to be more on a downward trend, especially not just DeVonta Smith himself, but as Jalen Hurts continues to get better, his receiving core will obviously start to get better with him as that progression starts up. But Tone, I think Justin Jefferson not only is the best in the league, he was the second best player in the NFL in the top 100. So when it comes to DeVonta Smith, what do you think the future holds for him, Tone?
It's so fascinating. DeVonta Smith is someone you would call a young veteran. When he came in, he was a 23-year-old rookie. That's a little older than average for most rookies that come in. Most rookies come in, they're 21, 22 years old. He was 23. So he was already polished and refined, not just as a player, but polished and refined as a professional. And he's never made an ass out of himself, so to speak. Right? He's always come in and done his job to the utmost degree. And there's some, that you have to put a lot of stock in his approach to not just his profession, but also his approach to his craft. I believe DeVonta Smith is one of the best route runners in the NFL. That was one of his calling cards coming out of college. Sure, he was slight of build, right? Sure, he maybe didn't have the blazing speed of a Tyreek Hill, right? But he's such a long player, long arms, long legs. He doesn't seem like he's going as fast as you may think because he has long strides, but he's covering a lot of ground there. DeVonta Smith, what stands out to me about his game that I noticed almost immediately is his ability to maintain focus, not just on the ball, but maintain focus on his technique on the sideline. I think DeVonta Smith is one of the best sideline catchers in the NFL. Most of his highlights in his rookie year were close quarters, tight windows on a sideline. One of his best catches of the year came, I believe, in that Washington game where I think it was a deep ball, like a 30 or 40 yard bomb from Jalen Hurts, and he managed to get both feet inside on the sideline. I think it was the right sideline. Again, DeVonta Smith, his game is going to continue to transcend year after year. His rookie year, 916 receiving yards on 64 catches. 2022, over 11, almost 1,200 receiving yards, 95 receptions. He's always averaged between 12 to 14 yards per reception. Always 5 and 7 touchdowns a year. He's such an efficient player that he's able to create so much separation with just pure technique. I think his game will transcend age and father time. There are some players where you can kind of tell once they get to the back nine, it's going to start to affect their effectiveness. This is no disrespect towards DK Metcalf or AJ Brown, but their game is more predicated on their physicality and their athleticism. That's not saying they're not good route runners. That's not saying they're not good at what they do. They're at the top of their craft. But there's some guys' game that are more predicated on technique and fundamentals and really being a much more polished product. And that's where DeVonta Smith comes in. He doesn't necessarily have the strength or the physicality of some of those guys, but he plays the position with such technique, and he's so fundamentally sound at the catch point. And I believe he's getting stronger, as a matter of fact. He caught way more 50-50 balls this season or in 2022 than he did in 2021. So by that logic, you're seeing his confidence growing. You're seeing him becoming stronger, more physical. And on top of that, he's an Iron Man. He hasn't missed a single game so far in his career. And that was a knock on him coming out of college. Will he survive the pounding of the NFL grind? And DeVonta Smith has shown that he's fully capable of doing that. And really quickly before I let D-Gun chime in, a lot of people always say, well, Jalen Waddle was the guy. If Jalen Waddle would have never got hurt, he would have never won that Heisman. He would have never, been able to showcase, who he is, so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe Jalen Waddle is the more electric player. But when I look at DeVonta Smith and the way he approaches the position, and I look at Jalen Waddle, they're both tremendous at their crafts. That we're going to be talking about that draft class with the three-headed monster, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and DeVonta Smith for a long time. That might have been the best trio of wide receivers we've seen come out at one time in the first round in quite some time. But I think DeVonta Smith is quite on par with Jalen Waddle. Again, he played in the system in his rookie year that wasn't really predicated on passing the ball that much. So he had 916 yards on 94 catches, 104 targets. That's not bad given the circumstances of the system he was in. Jalen Waddle was in a system where they threw the ball way more. He had a lot of dink and dunk. So all I'm saying is this, right? Jalen Waddle, tremendous player. DeVonta Smith, tremendous player. I think DeVonta Smith deserves more respect than he's been given. But again, it's all right. I like to compare him to a Marvin Harrison kind of guy, a guy that doesn't talk too much, doesn't really care about the rah-rah, but he's going to be, but he's going to produce, and he's going to give you everything you need when it matters most.
See, unfortunately, a lot of times we base who is the best of the best based on their overall numbers. But a lot of times the numbers are unfair because you look at a Davante Adams, he consistently over the last several years gets 120, 130 passes a game. Cooper Kupp, a few years ago, he led the NFL. What did he have, like 140 catches? Right. Led the NFL in receiving. Whereas another guy that cracks 1,000 yards may get 88 or 90 yards. So obviously his numbers are lesser. So the comparisons in that regard are unfair. If you put 15, 20 people in a room together who are hardcore football fans, even the so-called pundits in the game, and ask that simple question, who's the best receiver? Name your top 5 receivers in the game today. I guarantee you'd have 20 different answers. Now, you'd probably have 2 or 3 names on everybody's list. But when you get to 3 through 5, that's where the numbers vary. DeVonta Smith, in a short amount of time in the NFL, has already proven that he is one of the upper echelon receivers in the game. I love looking at receivers. When I base an exceptional receiver, I base it on body control. And based on what Tone just said, the guy that can consistently make those acrobatic sideline catches and have the mental wherewithal to focus on the ball, focus on somebody draped on him, and still get your feet in bounds consistently. For a lot of great receivers, a lot of them don't do that on a consistent basis.
Because they don't trust their technique.
They don't trust the technique. Yeah. See, like a Tyreek Hill, he knows where the sidelines are at all times. Odell Beckham, when he was in his prime, before he started having a series of knee injuries, Odell Beckham was the best of the best at making these one-handed acrobatic catches and tapping his feet in bounds and frustrating the heck out of defenders. And you have several receivers, like, let's just say more than several receivers, that are exceptions to that rule in today's game. But not every receiver has mastered that as early as the DeVonta Smith has in his career. And that's why I say right now you put him in that conversation. Now, a lot of people outside of Philadelphia won't, and that's understandable because he doesn't get the national accolades like the Justin Jefferson, DeVonta Smith. Cooper Kupp had one incredible year, but now he's talked about as one of the great receivers in the game.
I think he's overrated. I'm sorry. I think Cooper Kupp is one of the most overrated wide receivers in the NFL. If you look at his career, you isolate that one season. Every other year, he's a number 2 at best. I mean, again, I hate when it comes off as disrespect, but we got to be honest about what we see sometimes. Like, I'm not saying he's not good at what he does, but that year he had, I mean, kudos to him. Super Bowl, Offensive Player of the Year, all that kind of stuff. Like, it was great, right? But I can't put him in the category of a guy like A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson or Mike Evans or Keenan Allen or I personally can't. I don't know.
When I look at the Cooper Kupp, he's not a blazer, but what he is one of the best technicians in the game.
And I respect that. I got a lot of respect for that.
That man sets you up and shakes free of cornerbacks. There's a reason why he had 140 catches. But was he a one-hit wonder? We don't know. That still remains to be seen. But when you look at him run routes, sure-handed, not afraid to go over the middle. And I said he's not a blazer, but look at how many times he gets by DBs because of his technique, because of his ability, like a Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is not a blazer, and not even close to a blazer. You look at how many times Devontae Adams gets caught from behind when he's in open space. He's not fast. He's quick, and he's deceptive. Cooper Kupp is the same way. Cooper Kupp might be faster than Devontae Adams, but he's not a blazer. But because they have learned their craft so well in terms of route running and setting up DBs to make you think you're going to cut one way and you shake free the other way, that's a gift. That goes to show you he's worked and worked and worked at his craft, as is all the case with the upper echelon receivers in the game to get to where they are. But again, I look at Tyreek Hill has done it consistently. Devontae Adams has done it consistently. Cooper Kupp has had some decent years, but he had this one wow year that supposedly put him on this pedestal all of a sudden. No, because then he got hurt the next year. You got to be able to have that durability, as well if you're going to be mentioned in those conversations. And to me, he hasn't had that yet.
Sure. I also feel like a lot of times when a player is targeted too much, it's almost at their detriment. Like, it doesn't help their argument, because then it becomes similar to the Carson Wentz to Zach Ertz thing. It's like Zach Ertz had this incredible season, but he's focusing on him too much. Was Stafford doing that too much with Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp
91 targets that year.
So that he's being fed. All right, and look, to his credit, he's getting open. So I'm not going to take that away from him. But as far as DeVonta Smith goes, and Tone and Gunnar, I think both of you mentioned this, but like, we'll look at every single player, even if they have a good season, even if they have a good rookie year, which obviously DeVonta Smith did, and we'll nitpick and we'll say, well, what can they do better? My one request, if I could fish a wish after DeVonta Smith's year, certainly it would be that the guy throwing the football would improve, and Jalen Hurts certainly did that. It would be that they got another target next to him, and A.J. Brown, I think we could all agree, is a nice target to have next to him. But just personally, individually, the thing I was hoping DeVonta Smith would do is come into last season, the 2022 season, with stronger hands. His frame, I know a lot of people got bent out of shape. Not every wide receiver in the NFL is 6'4", 250 pounds. Like, that, not everybody is built like that, all right? So I'm over that. But if you can catch, run routes, avoid the big contact, get out of bounds, make those catches down the sideline, keep your feet in bounds, then you're going to be a great receiver in this league. And DeVonta Smith, I thought, from year 1 to year 2, showed you how much stronger his hands could be. Because when he would catch balls in traffic 2 years ago during his rookie season, a lot of times you'd see that other hand come in from a safety, any defensive back, corner, whatever, and they'd come in, then make a swipe, and the ball would be gone. He couldn't hold on to that football. Or if the ball was a little bit out of his reach, his fingers weren't strong enough to corral it in. Now they are. That's the biggest leap. Individually, just talking about DeVonta Smith, what he's done for himself. When the ball is delivered to him, his hands are a lot stronger to hold on to that ball in traffic. Or when it's just one-on-one, he's got the guy beat by half a step. And by the way, more on that in just 1 second. But when he's got the guy beat by half a step and they come in with that swat, that ball is securely in his hands. You talk about maturity overall mentally. He certainly has that. Now it's like his hands have caught up with that. They have matured, and they're a lot stronger than what they were during his rookie campaign. So I look forward to seeing him do that again. And as far as the route running goes, what I really found wild was Darius Slay, when he was talking about how great DeVonta Smith is. Darius Slay said, "Oh yeah, he's still one of the best route runners in the league, probably the best route runner in the league." And I was covering, and I was trying to stay with him, and I was staying with him. It was like he was trying to brag that he was staying with the best route runner in the league. He's like, I was staying with him, but nobody can stay with him like that. Like, he can still make plays like that. He doesn't even need the half step; he needs a quarter step, and that to him is wide open because for a guy that is not 6'4", 6'5", his catch radius is off the charts with balls he could jump to, lunge for, reach out to, one hand, curl in, all that. He just has a phenomenal catch radius for a guy that is not one of the bigger wide receivers in the league. And I look forward to seeing him take that to the next level this season. That's what I think a lot of us are looking forward to, if I do say so.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing. I promised we'd get into this segment here. The term camp crush has come around. Now, I want to talk about one person right now that I think has really jumped off the screen to a lot of people or jumped off the grass to a lot of people, and that's Sidney Brown. Gunnar, I know when we've talked about this, and Tone, I know you've said something similar as well. The safety position was really up in the air opening training camp. Some people were questioning whether or not even Reed Blankenship's job was really safe. Did he really solidify himself a starting role on this defense? I didn't believe it when I saw it, but Kayvon Wallace was getting first-team reps along with Terrell Edmunds. When they listed the safeties on the depth chart for as unofficial as it could be, they had Kayvon Wallace, they had Terrell Edmunds, they had Sidney Brown down with the second and third team. One preseason game, and boy, was there a shakeup to that roster. Then this week, you see Sidney Brown start to get first-team reps after he led the team in tackles against the Baltimore Ravens, after he was around the ball on every single play that he was in on defensively. It's not just one preseason game. This guy, I know he's only a third-round pick, but this guy, everything you read about and everything you watched him do at Illinois, this guy came in with, talk about maturity in a young player. This guy was bringing that to the table immediately. He talks after the Ravens game. I don't know if you guys saw this. He's talking about I just want to make sure I make the 53-man roster. I'm like, what? You're going to be a starter on this defense after that performance. It really feels like the Eagles are going to have a very inexperienced safety position when it comes to both him and Blankenship. You're talking about one full year under their belt combined starting off this season. Are you guys buying into the Sidney Brown hype as everybody's camp crush right now after one preseason game, or is this what you expected to see from Sidney Brown as camp went on, where he would earn a starter's role in that secondary? Where are you guys at on Sidney Brown?
Sidney Brown right now is doing everything he did when he was at Illinois. He flies around. He's around the ball. He's aggressive. He's assertive. And you saw him make an open field tackle, which was one of the negatives of all the pundits who graded him, is that he was inconsistent in tackling. He was always looking for the big hit instead of wrapping up. Well, you've seen him wrap up, and, you look at his sideline pursuit and how quickly he gets the ball carries. My goodness. You're right. I do think his curve is accelerating. You can tell he's hungry. He doesn't just want – he says he just wants to make the 53. No, he's trying to make a name for himself. That's what you want to see. He's shown all the attributes that we thought he would have coming out of college. Now, again, we saw a small sample size in a preseason game. Okay, he's been making a name for himself in his joint practice sessions against Cleveland. That's what he has to do consistently. Keep doing that. He's going to push for playing time. But you also notice that Reed Blankenship's looking over his shoulder because Reed has been getting a lot of pub. 3 interceptions against the Browns in 2 practice sessions. He's making plays as well. Sometimes somebody pushing you makes you a lot better. It makes some players a lot nervous, forcing them to make more mistakes. Right now, it looks like the presence of Sidney Brown is making Reed Blankenship a lot better player, and that's a good thing because I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of reality. You can see both Reed and Sidney on the back end of the defense and Terrell Edmonds sitting on the bench. I can see it happening. The Eagles like to get younger yet get better at the same time. Now, if you put those two on the back end together at the same time, you're going to have some problems early on, communication problems, things of that nature, but that's okay because you have enough surrounding them in terms of veteran presence that can cover up some of those minor deficiencies until they get it on the same page. But right now, Sidney Brown is providing that wow factor in camp.
Yeah, absolutely. I know as far as you mentioned, he's only a third-round pick, but I don't know. I'm of the mindset that first, second, third, those are high-value picks, right? So I don't want to just diminish a guy, and I'm not coming at you, but I personally don't want to diminish a guy because he was a third-round pick. These guys are talented, right? There's a lot of guys. Everybody can be a first-round pick, right? There's some guys who are borderline first round. Sometimes it depends on your position. Sometimes it depends on what positions are of high value in that particular draft and what teams need around that time. It's so many variables that go into where you're drafted, right? But being a third-round pick, the Philadelphia Eagles put a lot of stock into Sidney Brown. They've invested a high-value pick, in my opinion, in Sidney Brown. And when you think about Sidney Brown and what he brought to the table at Illinois, like you said, D-Gun, he doesn't just run two tackles. Like, he runs through tackles. He wants to run through you. Something that stood out to me, obviously they got into the scuffle at the joint practice because after Reed Blankenship intercepted the ball, he attempted to return it. And once the interception happens, defense turns into offense, and now they're trying to block. So at that point, Sidney Brown goes and lays a guy out. It was clean as well. Everyone said it was clean. He lays a guy out. Cleveland didn't take too kindly to that, and a scuffle ensued. And Sidney Brown had this to say about it. Quote, he said, "We're practicing hard. They're practicing hard. And that's what it turns into, a high-intensity practice. It's hot outside. It's early in the day, and we're ready to go. I'll have to go back and look at the tape, but I'm sure it was a clean hit. I want to be a feared player. That's been my mindset going into this. How can you not love a guy like that?" Right? He says, "I play with that intensity every single day. You're going to connect at some point. You're going to feel it. My intention isn't to hurt people, but if you're carrying that football, then you have to know I'm coming for you." End quote. That's the kind of guy we need in Philadelphia. That's that quote unquote Brian Dawkins mentality. That's that Weapon X mentality. Now, look, I'm not saying he's going to be that. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him because that's a Pro Football Hall of Fame type of talent right there, right? But a guy like Sidney Brown, his mentality, his approach to the game, maybe he may not start week 1 or week 2, but that's the kind of mentality you need on special teams. The Philadelphia Eagles special teams has been lackluster for the past handful of years. And when you got a guy like Sidney Brown who's coming to bring the wood every single day, and he's looking at it from the perspective of, I just want to make the 53-man roster. That's what I care about. Like, that level of humbleness, that level of gratitude, to your position, because his story is fascinating. He born and raised in Canada, mother got sick, was homeless for a time, had to live with his grandmother for a little bit. His mother sent him and his brother to the States, to Florida, to play high school ball. They come from a hockey background, so that already speaks to his mentality of how he approaches physicality. But they, from a young age, he's been fighting for everything he's ever gotten. So for him to become a third-round pick, went to the College of Illinois, get drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, he understands that this isn't given, this is earned. And that's the kind of guy that fits into the Philadelphia zeitgeist, the Philadelphia mentality, right? That blue collar lifestyle that Philadelphia is all about. You guys get it, Dika. You've been living there, near the area for well over 20 years. Farzi, likewise, I believe you grew up here. So my thing is, and me myself, I grew up in Philadelphia, born and raised North Philadelphia. There's a mentality that comes with this city. There's a grit, right? And Sidney Brown embodies that. It goes beyond just the numbers. He's a guy that's going to impact the flow of a game, and that's the kind of guy you want.
When was the last time you had a safety with the mindset of even mentioning the name with Brian Dawkins? Now, obviously Brian Dawkins wasn't always Brian Dawkins that we got to know. He had to. Right. I love telling the story about Dawkins. Told me this story a number of times, as well as on other platforms. He was worried every day about making a roster. He was afraid to look at his locker a lot of times because he thought it was going to be a pink slip hanging in his locker. Until one of the coaches finally told him, said, "No, you understand that a second-round pick normally makes the roster." He didn't know that. You know, he was worried every day. And it took until a Jim Johnson got here, which really opened up who Brian Dawkins became, you know, because he was always unsure of himself. Plus, he was always battling that depression element as well. So there was a lot going through Brian Dawkins' life. But I love everything about Sidney Brown. Loved him in college. You know, a lot of people say, man, I can't believe he lasted the 3rd round. Well, there's a lot of good players that can't go in the 1st or 2nd rounds for whatever reasons. They don't meet certain teams' needs at that particular time, and they keep sliding down the draft board. That's understandable. Great. Some of your best players in the history of the game are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks.
The league is filled. The league is filled with more 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round guys than anything else.
Look, Tom Brady. If Tom Brady only gets on the field because Drew Bledsoe got hurt. You know, who knows? If Bledsoe hadn't got hurt, what would Tom Brady's career have been like? Maybe he would have assumed that role in a later status in life. But once he got in there, the coach said, wait a minute. Wait, we didn't know this kid could do this. You know, all of a sudden, Drew Bledsoe was an afterthought. See, so, you know, I love Sidney Brown. He's not just, he's out there trying to turn heads, making sure that my name is going to be mentioned every day for something. Okay. And he's playing with this reckless abandon while he's learning to transition from a college player to a pro player. And he's doing more positive things than negative. Now, as a young player, he's going to continue to make mistakes. That's all right. But if you make mistakes hustling, coaches love that because they can smooth out the rough edges and tell you, okay, I need you to see you take a better angle this way. All right, I need you to see wrap up a little bit more. Your anticipation is fine. But watch this. If you're covering somebody, watch this in a player's footwork. You know what I'm saying? It comes with time. You don't learn everything your first year in the National Football League, but he's on a great trajectory right now.
Mm-hmm. And Devontae Maddox talked about it yesterday as well when he said, you know, this guy's going to make a mistake. He's going to make it fast and he's going to make it aggressive. Everything he does is fast and aggressive. And certainly the Philadelphia fan base loves that. The other thing that Devontae Maddox said was he flat out called him a heat-seeking missile. Sidney Brown is a heat-seeking missile as a safety. I look forward to the next step. There's a couple of things. I know we'll get more into it tomorrow when we're on the afternoon of the preseason, the second preseason game there against the Browns. But if I'm going to see Sidney Brown again, I am curious to see how he does in coverage as opposed to being more aggressive. Now, look, being aggressive is great, but I also want to see how he might react to some of the, what do they call it now, the trickeration behind the line of scrimmage, whether or not he's going to bite on fakes behind the line of scrimmage, whether he's going to bite on play action, whether or not he could drop back and make a ball hawking play as opposed to coming up to make a play closer to the line of scrimmage. That's the next step, I think, for a guy like Sidney Brown. But he's already gained a lot of adulation and a lot of praise from his coaching staff and from his players. One thing I found, teammates, one thing I found that was really interesting, Nick Sirianni yesterday was asked twice about Sidney Brown, specifically about Sidney Brown. He took that opportunity to just give, I think, a masterclass in coach speak, where he was like, oh, yeah, Sidney Brown, let me tell you how great our safeties are. And he wouldn't specifically talk about Sidney Brown until there was a follow-up question about, but Sidney Brown in particular is doing really well. Like, what are you making of? And he pointed to all the things you would assume.
I mean, he did
work ethic, all that stuff. But here's the thing. Is it wrong to acknowledge, like, especially if the question is directly about the player, is it wrong to acknowledge, or do you really have to pull teeth with the head coach to talk about just how well the guy is adapting to life at the NFL level?
It's one game. I mean, it's,
it's not, but the coach is keeping the player even keel, And you know what? Some coaches like to rave about their players. Other coaches, when does Bill Belichick tell you anything about anybody? It's all individually. Some coaches, they will pat players and pat them on the back, and put them up on his pedestal. You know what? If that's not Sirianni's MO, maybe he doesn't want to get his head too big at this stage. Hey, look, man, you're doing a great job. Just keep doing what you're doing. Okay.
And certain positions require a certain level of coddling, right? Like if you notice last year, not saying this is Jalen Hurts' character, but Nick Sirianni made it a point to always talk up Jalen Hurts. Your quarterback position requires a lot of instilling of confidence. You know what I'm saying? A defensive guy, a safety, those guys, and plus on top of that, he's a 3rd round pick, not diminishing the value of the pick, but they didn't spend the 1st round pick on him. So there's a difference in how they treat those guys and how they want to talk about those guys. So And also he's battling in a room that's clearly not yet set in stone. So I think Sirianni did the right thing. You don't want to just, make a guy think he's already arrived. But the good thing is Sidney Brown is a player that you don't have to even think about that when it comes to him. He knows he hasn't arrived. Like you said, Farzy, he's just trying to make the roster. Having that mentality, that goes back to what I said about the preseason game. These guys are fighting for livelihood. Sidney Brown strikes me as a guy that, he's not just fighting for glory, he's fighting for livelihood. He had an uninterrupted episode with the Philadelphia Eagles on their YouTube channel, and they focused on Bradbury and Sidney Brown. Sidney Brown spoke a lot about how he as a rookie they tell you maybe you shouldn't buy a house right away, wherever you get drafted, so on and so forth. He said, listen, I bought myself a house in Philly because I had to do it. It was one of those things that, being able to buy myself a home, that to me, that was the sign of I've arrived, not just as a player, but as a professional, as a man, being able to, knowing where I came from, being homeless, I'm going to buy myself a house. So I respect his mentality, right? So yeah, man, it's only one preseason game. He had 9 solo tackles. I don't really take stats too much into account in the preseason, but I just admired his approach, how when he was on that field, you knew he was there, he was flying around. And like you said, Farzy, the next step in his development is just patience and knowing when to let his foot off the gas and when to hit the brake and so on and so forth.
See, I like the accolades he's getting now, but Tone, you having been on the show with me and Rob and Barrett for so long, you know how I am about training camp, preseason.
Oh, I know.
So forth.
You scoff at it. You scoff at it.
I do. I need to see him as good as he looks. I want to see when coordinators start scheming, when they start looking at him, what his pluses and minuses are, how they try to scheme against him. A coordinator schemes against an opposing team's overall concepts, and they start singling out individual players that they may try to attack. I'm not saying they're going to be trying to attack Sidney Brown if he becomes that starter, but I want to see how he responds when he's playing against the best of the best, from the quarterbacks to the wide receivers in a game. And let's face it, you look at this collection of quarterbacks they're playing this year, light years ahead of what they played last year, okay? So I want to see, I have to wait to form a definitive opinion of when they get to the regular season. I love all the accolades, the training camp, thunder that certain players get, the preseason games, you're looking at who they're playing opposite against, looks good. You'd rather see them making positive plays than negative plays, but I got to see when you hit the ground running, when it starts for real, exactly what we're looking at here.
All right. Now, it's not the actual Hall of Fame, but we'll call it the Training Camp Hall of Fame. Let's talk about some camp crushes when we come back. Some people that we thought were going to be all that when the season actually started right after training camp. But we'll get into that. We'll also get into actual first-round picks. We've been talking about third-round picks. We'll get into Nolan Smith. We'll get into, of course, Jalen Carter, the expectation of what they showed us in preseason game number 1 and what the expectation could be going into preseason game number 2. Also, the joint practices with the Cleveland Browns were very hit or miss. Eagles missed big time in the first one, and they hit big time in the second one. So we'll break that down when we come back here on Sports Take. That's Tone DeShields. That's Derek Gunn. My name is Mark Farzetta. We're in for Rob Ellis today, who has the rest of the week off. Be back with you guys.